We enter into this time and this place to join our hearts and our minds. We come to this place. The doors open, the heat comes on, some heat at least. Biscuits are laid, well, they will be in the future. The water heats, and you all come. We'll start there, right? What is it that we come here seeking? Many things, too many to mention them all. Yet it is likely that some common longings draw us to be with one another, to remember what is most important in life, to be challenged to live more truly, more deeply, with integrity and kindness and hope and love, to feel the company of those who seek a common path, to be renewed in our faith and in the promise of this life. It is good to be here. Come, let us worship together.
so glad you've come. And whoever you are, we welcome you in the fullness of who you are. As we are gathering here in our sanctuary, we'd like to remind you that we have an upgraded air exchange system that exceeds CDC recommendations and gives us the equivalent of outdoor air, regardless of whether our doors are open or closed. As we begin, we want to acknowledge that this church occupies land in Huichin, the unceded territory of the Chuchenyo-speaking Ohlone people. We understand that we continue to benefit from the seizure and occupation of this land. We acknowledge and embrace our responsibility to take restorative action. We affirm that this is deeply felt with Indigenous communities, aligning in solidarity, supporting Indigenous projects, and caring properly for the land. So please take a moment to prepare yourself and your space for our time together. Now, as Reverend Michelle lights the chalice flame in our freshly rededicated sanctuary chalice, let us share the words by David Usher. Bring your hopes and anticipations. Bring your joys and celebrations. Bring your sorrows and lamentations. Bring your faith and adorations. Bring to this hour of worship all that makes your life real and meaningful, that you may be blessed by the shared light of our lives with others. We also pause to remind ourselves of some of the foundations of resilience. With Reverend Michelle, we light a candle of courage, a candle of acts of service, a candle of fellowship, and a candle of hope. May we find and cultivate these in ourselves and in one another. Now please join us in singing our opening song, Gather the Spirit. The words will be on the screen. Thank you.
Gather the Spirit, harvest
Please join with me now in saying our covenant. Love guides this church. The quest for truth and justice is its common purpose. To give thanks, listen deeply, speak with care, honor our differences, and grant forgiveness. These things we covenant with one another.
Good morning. The song that Barry's about to sing is in German, and it's a song about renewal of energy. It's a beautiful spring night, and the spirit is coming alive. It's very brief and excited and full of enthusiasm for something newly refreshed.
Spring is coming.
Im Garten durch die Lüfte hört ich Wandervögel was bedeutet Frühlingsdüfte? Unten fängt schon an zu blühen. Jauchzen möchte ich weinen, ist mir's doch, als könnt ich sein. Alte Wunder wieder scheinen mit dem Mond des Glanz herein. Und der Mond die Sterne tagend und im Traume rauscht der Hain und die Nachtigallen schlagend. Sie ist deine, sie ist dein.
If we can have any of our other young ones in the sanctuary to come on down. Come on, come on. Oh, I have toys today. Come on now. Any other young at heart, folks? Excellent. I am wondering. Okay, I am wondering how good are y'all at balancing? Like on a balance beam? Are you good at being on a balance beam? Are you pretty good at a balance beam? Are you good at a balance beam? I am not. I am not. When I get on, I feel like I'm going to fall the whole time and I'm wobbling the whole time. Yeah, I'm not good at on a balance beam. What are some other times that you're balancing? Ice skates or roller skates? Yeah? What are some other times you're balancing? Rollerblades. I had a set of those and I never felt like I could balance. I was always afraid of falling. There are some life metaphors there, don't worry. So, do you think you could balance something? Do you think you could balance this bird on your finger? You don't think you could? You think you could? Okay, hold out a finger. Let's try. Hold up. So, flip your finger over. There you go. Let's see. Can you balance it there? Wow. You want to try? Okay, let's try. You want to try? See, this is what you get when you come to the front. You get to play with toys. Come on now. Think you balance it there? I'm going to try to balance it. Now, what happens if we move it up over our heads so it can fly? Can we keep it balanced? Pretty cool. What if we make it fly around? Sometimes it's hard to keep things in balance, and sometimes it's not. What do you think's going on with this bird? The beak is poking your finger. It is a little pokey. Birds are pretty good at balancing on the air. Yeah, what is it? The wings are making it easier to balance. See the design here? Some physics nerd figured out exactly what it needed to be. And the wings do make it easier to balance. Now, what do you think you can do? You think you can switch it to another finger and for it to keep balance? See if you can do that. You did it? If we had a whole lot more people up here, we'd try to pass them around and see if we can work together to keep things balanced, because sometimes we got to do that. We got to work together to keep things balanced. Pretty cool, isn't it? So what I'm going to invite y'all to do, as we're singing you out to classes, is go see if you can balance it on somebody else's finger as you're walking out. And if you want to try to change it to balance on somebody else's finger, you can. Let's see how many people can get to play with balancing something today. So can you go and try to balance it on somebody else's finger? Okay. And I think we're going to sing them to their classes and their activities now.
Guide my feet while I run this race. Guide my feet while I run this race. Guide my feet while I run this race. For I don't want to run this race in vain. Hold my hand. Hold my hand while I run this race. Hold my hand while I run this race. Hold my hand while I run this race. For I don't want to run this race in vain. Race in vain.
Thank you, Susan. That was lovely. So wonderfully brought us into this quiet time in our service. Is there any sound coming out? There's some. We got some there we go. Okay. Because we now enter this time, this heart of our service, this time when we bring and open our hearts and are vulnerable to the things that may be within us. We lift up and hold the joys, the sorrows, the cares and challenges we may each be facing. So during our time this morning, if you're online, I invite you to share any joys or sorrows or significant milestones in the comments section. And for those who are here in the room, I invite you to call out a name of someone you may be holding a joy for, holding a sorrow for, or you know is going through a challenging time. It may even be your own name. In our time of silence, I invite us to speak these names into the heart of our space. I love it when we can share these with each other. So we lift up, we hold all of these spoken as well as unspoken blessings and concerns in the embrace of this community. Let us join now in a time of silence. In this time of meditation with this reading by Jess Reynolds. On my worst days, it is gravity that I am the most grateful for. The way the earth pulls at me from her core, yearns for me, keeps me pressed tightly against her surface. When my own core feels hollowed out, when I have no more mass than a leaf dead on the branch, still this is enough for the earth to find me. She reaches for what little I have and says, stay here with me. Every meditation I have ever done begins by asking me to ground myself. This is not so much an action as it is an inaction. Surrender. Voluntary abandonment of my own edges and tidy packaging. So now let us sit. Let us sit and ground. Press the soles of your feet back into the ground that you sprang from. And this is cork wood your feet are on here. Press into this wood of the earth. Feel the weight of your body and know it is glorious. You are born of soil and sun, and all the heaviness of the earth is a call to you. The earth is reaching for you. Reach back, reach back. And now let us remain seated and sing a beautiful meditative piece for all that is our life.
All that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise, for all that is a gift which we are called to use to build the to use to build the common good and make our own days glad.
Our reading today was written by Adrienne Marie Brown, titled, How Does Crying Work? Last weekend, I cried in front of people. I suspected it could happen. I was teaching a somatics course and was being vulnerable in front of the class. It wasn't just a few tears. It's the kind of crying where you feel ugly and want to be smaller and picked up by someone who has the answers and will carry you back to some time before you knew adult suffering. It doesn't much matter what I started crying about. When it was time to be done, my tears were not done. They felt nonspecific and available. Like new thoughts, old memories, and ongoing longings would float up in my mind, and they also wanted tears. The crying, the feelings made me pale and tired and prickly and pushy and honest without sweetness. Thank Octavia, I loved so many patient people, or I think I would truly have to go find a castaway, lost island, and learn to open coconuts on rocks. Yesterday, I was driving from one home to another, and in a pause between two songs, more tears came, suddenly, strong enough I had to pull off at the next exit. My tears almost always come at the sharp point of a singular, true thought. This person is gone. I was thoughtless. Someone scared my nibbly, and I wasn't there. Why is my species suicidal? I miss my grandparents. Later, I drove through a storm, and finally, for the first time since crying in front of people, felt just right. Lightning shot down bright fingers trying to scorch earth. Thunder clapped and undulated overhead, saying, wrong way, turn around." And the rain was so abundant. I saw how you can't rush rain, can't rush a storm. I've been trying to rush through my amazing life, my own transitions, rushing to share everything I learn, rushing to be everywhere at once, leaving no time for big, messy, beautiful storms, for my rage, my overwhelm, my celebration. Tears are another way the body takes time, slows things down. My body says, slower, slower. No, nothing. Just listen. No, listen. Fill up your cup. Then maybe pour for others. Slower. It may even seem like you stop for a moment. Slow like that. I spent time with my beastie nibbling yesterday. She's been in this world just 9 months now. She's learning about crying, testing out her lungs and her discontent. We stepped onto her balcony, and the rain had just cleared. Her face was calming. A fat tear lingered on her cheek. She looked up in wonder and watched a flock of birds fly by us. I just watched her face, the full range of feeling there. I want to live at this pace. My face is wet, my breath is deeper. I'm catching up with myself. I want to really be here for my life. I'm thinking of rewriting The Tortoise and the Hare as a shape-shifting story with my body.
It is so good being here and being able to see all of your faces for our worship service. Balance can be more tenuous than we might realize, especially if we aren't paying attention. A while back, I came down with a case of vertigo. It's happened a couple of times and is entirely disconcerting. The version of it that my body tends to get is that the world is literally spinning around, giving me a good degree of motion sickness, and as a result, making me look like a stumbling drunk if I try to walk. In the past, it's only lasted a few days, and probably the most ridiculous time it happened was when I was on shift as a hospital chaplain. Less motion sickness that time, but definitely the stumbling drunk look. I made my way through the shift, simply walking slowly along the side of the hallways, because I was holding on, and leaned against something for stability while talking with folks. Except for the nurses who caught me checking for low blood pressure, no one really noticed. Here's the wild thing, though. What causes my vertigo is stones that form in my ear canals. Little itty-bitty kidney stones, but they're ear stones. Tiny, tiny stones floating and getting stuck in my ear canal and disrupting my balance. It is wild that something that incredibly small, probably no larger than a mustard seed if we go biblical with our references, something that small can have that much of an effect on how an entire body is functioning. Our bodies talk to us, whether we're paying attention or not. When vertigo has literally taken me off my feet, I've tried to listen to what my body is saying and pay attention to what might be out of balance in my life. It probably tried to tell me in more subtle ways, but I wasn't listening. So instead, it has to knock me over. And each time this has happened, there's been some fairly obvious way that things were out of balance for me. Balance and renewal are something that we could probably talk about every week and be able to have something to talk about and some insight for our lives. And they are spiritual issues just as much as they are life issues. And being out of balance means we are out of alignment in some way, which hampers our ability to be present and true in so many other ways. In fact, one could say that being balanced and in alignment are prerequisites for accessing our spiritual selves other than in just a merely perfunctory way. Balance is a spiritual matter as much as it is a prerequisite for other spiritual matters. And being in balance and regaining balance is a type of renewal all by itself. Now, to talk about balance, the place we need to focus on first is the place where, frankly, we need to look for many sorts of things. We need to look at our daily lives, at the stuff we do and repeat on a regular basis, and where most of that stuff happens. We need to look at our homes. These are the places where we usually spend a majority of our time, a significant majority of our rest and rejuvenation time, where our family may gather and hopefully where we can relax and be vulnerable, although that is certainly not always the case. And for folks who do not currently have homes, are only marginally housed, are in transition between homes, or have stressful, or even dangerous home situations. Rest and balance can be even more. I'm going to go to the lectern mic because I hear this one's cutting out on sound, okay? I'm seeing nods, so other folks are having trouble as well. For house, there we go. Our home is a primary place for us to look at a whole bunch of things. And our time going through this pandemic in many ways has increased the distinction between home and away, especially during the time of sheltering in place, i.e. home, but also going forward from there. Even now, I feel myself relaxing and feeling different when I walk through my door, and when I get into my car too, as it's kind of an extension of that core space. At a time in the past when I went from a less than ideal situation I was living in into my own place, the difference then was palpable. Home is a special place. And for a side note, as I've gotten thinking about spiritual practices and personal spiritual development, I've been thinking about home a lot in that context. Regular, repeated practices, traditions, rituals, if you let me call them that, what we value and focus on more than anything else, these happen in our homes, they happen in our daily lives. So the reminders and the habits to encourage these belong right there in our daily lives in order to seep their way in. And given this fairly significant time of virtual church, when nearly all of our religious and spiritual lives were taking place at home, I've really gotten to thinking about in that way, and how best to encourage spiritual practices in our spiritual lives at home. So hopefully, little tack here, more coming on that in the future. Back to balance and to our homes. There is a really cool wisdom story that applies well here. It's the one about the big jar and the stones, and Don is going to bring me my big jar. Thanks, Don. All right, so in this story, a teacher brings in a large jar into class. Jar, and I will put the jar right here. Teacher plunks the jar on the desk and then proceeds to fill the jar with fairly large stones. They then ask the class if the jar is full, and the class says, yeah, sure, it's full. Then the teacher, this is a tricky teacher, pulls out a container of pebbles and pours them into the jar, and they fill in all the space between the larger rocks. Then I ask the class, is the jar full? Yes, says the students, it's full now. You can probably guess what's coming next. You got it? Teacher then pulls out sand and pours that into the jar, after which they all agree the jar is full. The moral of this, the teacher explained, is that the rocks represent the large things in our lives, the important things, our priorities. We need to make sure we have the space for them available before we fill up our life with the less important things. Now, I love this wisdom story because there are so many things we can get out of it. To start with, for the rational-brained folks in here, I know you're here, who are still arguing in your minds that the jar isn't completely full, let's take out some water, let's pour the water in too, let's add some pressure if we want to fit a few more molecules in there. Can you agree with me now it's full? Okay, we got a full jar. So what happens if we fill it with pebbles or sand or water first? Then we'll have trouble filling in the larger priorities when something comes along. Or we fill it with some larger priorities and then pebbles for the rest of the way without leaving space for more. Brimming full lives aren't very balanced ones. And what about capacity, too? How many of us feel like our jar is this big every day? And how many of us may feel like we have days when our jar feels like this instead? Anyone have small jar days, too? Oh, I sure do. I meant to bring a few different sizes of jars so we can compare how we feel, but anyways, you get the idea. Feeling overwhelmed and not balanced can happen even way more easily during our small jar times. And also, why are so many of us compelled to keep our jars so full all the time? As athletes well know, they can't keep going at full speed or full strength at all times. Times of rest are essential so they can keep performing in their sport. A Tai Chi teacher once told me, and I think it was the 70% rule, percentage might be wrong, but okay, it's the principle of this. It was to aim to not stress oneself beyond 70% of one's capacity. And it's the times when we push ourselves further and beyond that, we often get wake-up calls that we have pushed ourselves out of balance. Or one of those big rock priorities comes around that we need to be able to embrace, and we just don't have the space to even look at it. And sometimes it's the reminders like vertigo or simply ending up feeling stressed and burned out. Whether we're a small jar or a big jar, if it's full, it's full. Fortunately, there are lots of movements around today working on rebalancing the constant stress that our society seems to push and value. Meditative practices have become fairly common and mainstream. One author, Dan Harris, a former high-stress newscaster, after having a complete breakdown on air that he talks about, he brought a meditation practice into his life. And how he described it as beautiful. He said it made him feel about 10% happier. Isn't that cool? Creating space and focus and some calm time, that can make us 10% happier. Maybe more, but that is such a reasonable and tangible way to put it. Why do you do this? Oh, because it makes me about 10% happier. Isn't that fabulous? I want 10% things in my life. So what does all of this mean? How many folks here could use some rebalancing, some rest, or at least some release and renewal? Yeah? Absolutely. I was talking with one person this past week who was sharing about their reflections from during the shifts and the forced stillness over the past couple years and how much chaos they realized was in their lives. For them, it took first seeing the chaos and not running from it, but rather giving themselves permission to be in the chaos, to identify it, and to be intentional about what changes to make and how to make them. And while there is still a seriously good bit of chaos there for them, they've made some huge steps towards addressing some things that they never really would have to bring a significant degree of renewal into their life. And now it has filtered and spilled out into their family and other folks around them. So that's really the first step, to simply be still. How many of y'all is that easy for? Okay, how many of us is it harder for? Yeah, I'm in that category. I like moving and going and not so much standing at my sink even, dealing with the pile of dishes I'm not going to talk about publicly. Oh wait, I just did. Okay, let's forget that. To be still, to sit down and do nothing, to reflect and open yourself to what your body may be trying to tell you, or what the universe or God may be whispering, depending on what your theology may be. Or maybe when the universe is instead chasing you with a 2x4 and you keep going fast enough to avoid it. Okay, paying attention to that too. Now, it might feel like stagnancy to stop and be still, but this is a productive stop. If we want to call it a productive stagnancy. Because remember, even the stagnant water in swamps can do beautiful things. That's where the orchids grow, in the stagnant water in the swamps. To stop and be still, to simply observe what may be swirling around you, whether it be chaos and larger insights or simply the mind-numbing mundane items filling up your time and attention. To stop and be still and identify what's around you. And then here's a bit of grace you can give yourself, to give yourself permission that it's all okay. This is an anti-shame church. We're not about blaming or shoulding or shame tripping. We'll leave that to other contexts that use shame as a motivator, because that doesn't honor your inherent worth and dignity. So no shame here. Instead, just take a look at what's in your jar right now and decide if that's the way you want it to be. If I were honest, mine could use some changes, but again, no shame. Different times in our lives can be harder on us, and the past 2 years have been anything but easy and smooth going. Maybe it might be a bit of balance needed in one part. Maybe it's remembering something that feels renewing for you that you haven't done in a while. What might these things be for you? Our Soul Matters monthly theme for this past month has been renewing our faith. And what we've been talking about today is largely renewing our faith in ourselves, finding balance in our lives and ourselves, which, as we talked about, is a prerequisite for so many other things. Renewing our spirituality, renewing our religious faith depends on our having some space. Depends on our having some space and attention to open ourselves for it. And it is certainly refreshing when we can. This past week held the spring equinox, a day of literal planetary balance. The first day of spring, and flowers have been blooming around us here for a good while. This is a time of renewal and growth. Preparing for what may lay ahead is up to each of us, ready for what we may face in our own lives and as UUCB moves forward into the coming weeks and months and years ahead. May you be open to the messages that may come, the joy that emerges, and the sunlight as it warms you. Blessed be.
We are now entering the final phase of our Stewardship Pledge campaign for next year. During February and March, in each Sunday service, we've heard testimonials from many of our cherished leaders addressing the topic, the value of UUCB in my life and why I give as generously as I can. Let's kindle our memories of these inspiring moments. First, we heard from our board and church president, Beth Pollard. Then Patrick Cullinane, on whom we prevailed to lead our pledge campaign yet again. Natalie Campbell of the Social Justice Council and Chalice Circles at Good Neighbor Leadership. Judy Sam of Pastoral Care provides these beautiful floral arrangements for our chancel each Sunday. Suzette Anderson Duggan, devoted leader in family ministry. Diana Claghorn, worship associate, dedicated member of the tech team throughout the pandemic, and of course, gifted singer. Cynthia Athrobides, inspiring worship associate. Lonnie Mosley of Social Justice membership, Zoom hosting, and whose love is omnipresent in our congregation. Tom Tripp of Buildings and Grounds, who has played a big part in making it possible for us to gather in this sanctuary safely. And finally, Anne Greenwood, church member extraordinaire, who last week told us how our church over 45 years helped her transform lemons into lemonade, sweet lemonade, and her big life transitions. I plan to follow her model for making my pledge for next year. She said, "I don't give until it hurts. I give until I feel really good." I feel great honor and gratitude to be in the company of these people I've just mentioned. This is a large part of the value of UUCB for me and why I give as generously as I can.
Good morning. I'm Celine Fabiano. Like Don, I have been inspired these past few weeks by the church members who have shared with us why UUCB is so important to them. Like Don, I am also a member of the Stewardship Committee. Through my work on this committee, I've gained a greater appreciation for the importance of the pledge drive. 40% of this church's income comes from individual pledges. Member pledges sustain this church and allow us to do the great work that we do. And our pledges are more important than ever as we face additional and increasing costs in the coming year. During this year, we will begin the process of searching for a minister as well as hiring a full-time director of religious education. The UUA advises us to budget $15,000 to cover the costs of the ministerial search. Being in a good fiscal position is very important to the church as we go into the search. Prospective candidates will be evaluating the health and commitment of this community by looking at our finances. We want to attract the best candidates by being able to offer a strong compensation package and by showing the candidates that we invest in our church community. We are also facing increased personnel costs. Simply because of inflation, we must add a 6% cost of living adjustment to staff salaries. And in order to attract and retain talented staff and to live our values, we need to ensure we are compensating staff fairly. So it is clear that our church matters to a lot of us, and I am here to state emphatically that your pledges matter to this church. You make a difference by supporting this church community. Thank you so much to all of you who have already pledged. And if you haven't done so yet, I strongly encourage you to pledge as soon as possible and to be as generous as possible. All of the wonderful people Don mentioned have expressed a commitment to the mission of UUCB that I think we all feel. Together, we are pledging to continue to sustain this vibrant community. Together, we are pledging to continue to sustain one another. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Celine. As we commit together to making this a loving community, we take time to remember that UUCB needs our gifts and support. We invite you now to make an offering. Each week, half our offerings are shared with a good neighbor organization that needs our financial support, and we hope that you will continue to practice generosity with them during these difficult times. This month, our good neighbor is the Women's Cancer Resource Center. The Women's Cancer Resource Center helps women with cancer improve their quality of life through education, supportive services, and practical assistance. They serve people with any form of cancer from all backgrounds, economic levels, and ethnicities. Their clients are people with new diagnoses, people in remission, living with metastatic disease, or those receiving end-of-life care. You might be wondering how we will be doing the offertory. Well, if you're here in the sanctuary, we will not be passing the plate. Instead, you can either give electronically, or you can grab a donation envelope from the back of the pew and put it, along with your donation, of course, into the donation box, which is sitting beside the fountain in the atrium. There are a number of ways you can give electronically. If you look at the back of your name tag, there is a QR code and a web address that will take you to our giving page, and a number that can be used for text to give. For folks at home, directions for giving will be on the screen. However you give, please indicate whether it's a pledge or plate donation. Offerings of any value are received with gratitude. Thank you. Please join me in dedicating our offering. We dedicate our offering and ourselves to the mission of this congregation, to create loving community, inspire spiritual growth, and encourage lives of integrity, joy, and service.
It has been so good being together today. Y'all ready for some announcements? Woohoo, exactly. Come on now. All right, so a few things to note. Please remember to pre-register for next week's service if you want to try out your QR code skills. There's QR codes for it out in the lobby. And of course, there'll be the link that goes out in the week ahead. And a reminder email next Sunday you want to be here for. It's a Music Sunday. So please pre-register for the service so we know how many to expect. And still doing my teach about the lanyards. You'll notice that we've got nice traffic light lanyards on, we all do. And I've got mine back there, don't worry, I'll put it back on. And just a reminder of how we are using our lanyards to talk about consent here. That the red lanyard means, I'm glad to see you, but I'm being careful, please stay 6 feet. The yellow means, I'm okay with closer proximity, but not hugs at the moment. And the green means, I'm okay with hugs, but please ask first. So isn't this great that with something this simple, we can talk about consent for proximity and for touch here and be able to respect each other's choices and wishes. For those who are watching this from home, there will be a virtual coffee hour on Zoom after the service. For folks here, we get to greet each other and talk, and please join in other church programming as it happens throughout the week virtually. And a couple things to mark your calendars about or be aware of for when you're seeing the notices about them. Mark your calendars, or remember these dates, for the town hall information sessions about determining the future of the Freestone Retreat property. We'll be having some town hall sessions. It'll be both live here in the sanctuary and virtually on Sundays, April 10th and 24th. And then we'll have a virtual town hall information session Tuesday evening on April the 12th. So I hope you can make it to some of those. We'll have a bunch of information going out in the next week or so that we can all learn really, okay, what is all going on and the decisions and things we need to think about regarding the Freestone property. But right now we're just learning and getting the information. Decisions won't be until this fall. All right, and it is that time in the life of a church that UUCB is forming a ministerial search committee. As you know, I'm an interim, I'm an in-between minister, and it's time for UUCB to look at what comes next. There will be an email going out to all members that are subscribed to at least the week ahead or one of our church emails with a link to a poll with some questions on it, because the formation of the ministerial search committee belongs to you. It belongs to you, the members of UUCB. So please take part in that poll, and if the folks who are working on the forming of the search committee haven't heard from you, they'll be calling all members to make sure that all of your voices are included in bringing together the committee for this important work. A couple of things that I want to remind you about as we're getting back together again. As some folks have noticed, and for anyone who's gone, you may have seen the signs, we have shifted our bathrooms to be more gender inclusive, so that all of our bathrooms are gender inclusive bathrooms. You'll see the ones right here in the atrium. I don't know if I have ever said the word I'm about to say from the pulpit, so get ready for it. One of them has an all genders sign, and the other one has an all genders with urinals sign. There's the word I've never said from the pulpit. And if you'd prefer a single room one, there's one over by the Saphir room where those bathrooms, both the multi-stall ones and the single room one, are also all genders. It's a way that we as UUCB are embodying our values to be inclusive and welcoming. And on your way out today, please, instead of separating name tags and lanyards like we did last week, we'll be doing what we'll be doing going forward. And the big pegboard with hooks on it will be out right outside the door of the church. Please hang up your name tag there, and it'll be there for you next time you come to church. And then the last little one, I saw my birds making it through the sanctuary. If you can just get those back to me, that'd be super awesome. Because I was hoping they wouldn't, fly away. All right, ready for a closing song? So we just had Equinox, and we're finishing up March, so it's a really cool song, All Beautiful, the March of Days, which someone claimed, why are we singing about snow? I was joking about snow this past week, and then I went out into some of the mountains in east of here in California, and guess what was on top of them? Snow. We still got some snow around, but our days are marching forward. So please rise in body or in spirit, and let's sing All Beautiful, the March of Day.
Oh
eternity, brief moments of insight and opportunities to move and dance. Let us gather them up for the precious gifts they are, and, renewed by their grace, move boldly into the unknown. And now, from this time of worship, may you go with hope, with connection, with peace, and with a seeking and a search for balance. And remember, you are never all alone. Blessed be.